Welcome to Love Aurora, a weekly podcast report highlighting amazing people, organizations, and events that are making Aurora a better place to live. Here's your host, Gene Roncone.
Aurora Public Schools is the sixth largest school district in the state of Colorado, has over 40,000 students, 60 schools, and 5,000 employees. Well, last week we began a two-part series with their superintendent, Rico Munn. Superintendent Munn has had a very distinguished career as an educational leader in Colorado. He served Governor Hickenlooper on the Board of Governors for the Colorado State University System and also served on the Colorado State Board of Education. He is an attorney, a practical problem solver, and he's here in the studio today to pick up on part two, where we're going to talk about the strategic plan that they are introducing. Superintendent Munn, man, thanks for joining us today again.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Well, listen, you and the board recently compiled a 2020 strategic plan. It's still kind of, I wouldn't say the early stages, but you've got drafts out, and those were made public. I saw the first one at a Leadership Aurora meeting. What inspired this plan? What was the genesis of this plan?
Well, the idea of the plan was that it be a really grassroots from the ground up. We started with all of the community feedback that the board had gotten during the process to select a new superintendent, a little over 18 months ago.
Okay.
And then we really took that and filtered it down to say, what are the core beliefs? What are the key things that this community believes are important in education and in the Aurora Public Schools? And we used that as a starting point.
Okay.
And then we went out to the community again with a draft of core belief statements and of strategic goals, and went to 30-plus community groups, which had any number of people in them, and also internal groups as well, obviously, and really kept working and refining a lot of that work. We had a strategic planning committee made up of a variety of community stakeholders from around Aurora who helped filter that information and break it down and try to really put that into that set of core beliefs and strategic goals that are now the strategic plan. And so the plan itself was adopted by the board in late January, and now we're working on the implementation part of that.
Yeah, it's exciting. We're going to break that down a little bit today. You had a group, kind of a steering committee, I guess, that was kind of filtrating in the discovery process, and I want to start by talking about some of the core beliefs that the strategic plan says. But in the introduction, there was something that grabbed my attention, and it says that the success of this plan requires a partnership, and you listed 4 key partners for that partnership, which were students, families, staff, and community. There's no right or wrong answer to this question, but obviously every one of those members has to bring something to the table for that plan to be successful, for that partnership to work. What is the biggest obstacles that have to be overcome for each one of those? Let's start with students. For the plan to be successful, what's the biggest challenge students are going to face?
Well, and I don't know that I can break it apart because it's really a collective effort. Right? When I came to the district, one of the things that I put out to the community and to the staff is I had a set of 10 beliefs, 10 things that I said, these are my truths for how I'll lead the district. One of those was the belief that every part of the community is a potential resource. And so an understanding that every part of the community has something to give and to be part of this, and that we need to understand and make sure we have meaningful ways to access that. So for students, the students have a responsibility to take ownership of their learning and to be self-directed in that. And a lot of the plan is built around that idea that they will be self-directed, that they will be self-aware, and that there will be a sense of self-determination that they have to whatever their future is, to their own goals.
Excellent. And families, that's tough. That's a tough one because it doesn't matter what part of the city you're in. Families are too busy today. What's the challenge for families to be a good partner in the strategic plan?
Well, the challenge for families is on a couple of fronts. One, families are families, and there's a lot of tough stuff going on in every family, my family, your family, but to help keep students focused on their ability to shape their own future. Right? That if they do the right things, that if they work hard, they can shape their own future and really be in a place to make those decisions. And sometimes it's difficult for families to understand what that might look like within a school context, to understand what our expectations are. So we do our best to partner with families so there's a clear understanding of what those expectations are, that they might be different in the home than they are in the school, school, and that there might be reasons that we're asking for certain behaviors or certain expectations around homework that are important to the overall scheme of what we're trying to do. So it's important to have that dialogue.
Okay. And the third role in your partnership definition was staff, which would be, I would guess, are you speaking general terms, all APS staff, or are you talking teaching staff? Or
I'm talking everybody.
Okay.
The entire staff, yes.
And what's going to be required of them? What obstacles do they need to overcome?
The biggest obstacle, I think, for staff is focus. Because there's so much that happens and so much going on, and it's very easy to lose focus or to get overwhelmed. And I think our people do a tremendous job of staying focused on that core job of accelerating learning for our students.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And the last one is community. You talked about a little bit about that last week. What's the biggest challenge for the community if they're going to be the fourth partner in this key relationship?
Well, I think it's recognizing the need for a wraparound service, wraparound needs of our students. We have a number of highly impacted students who really need community support for a variety of things. On top of educating kids, oftentimes the schools, and not just APS, but schools, are called upon to do a lot of different things. It's called upon to, we feed a lot of kids 2 meals a day. Obviously, we provide opportunities for them to get clothing, for medical services, for mental and medical care, and all those things are not necessarily the core work of a school district.
Okay.
And so we need partners to help do that work. We need partners to help facilitate some of that and to allow us to focus on that core work.
Yeah. And man, that is amazing. What you just said is, I grew up as a kid. I was in the hood, came from a single parent family, steel town. The school's educated then. They didn't feed breakfast. They didn't do lunch. They didn't get me coats. I remember a lot of times we, one rainy day we went out. My mom cut a hole in the corner of a trash bag, and that was the raincoat for that day. This has got to be difficult for you guys to stay focused. You are doing so many things today. Does it require a lot of vision casting for this extra stuff to happen, or is it something that culture has just grown into?
Yes, it's both, right? When we talked about last week around that unified job description, that focus on what our core job is, accelerating learning, and how much our community needs us to do that job. Implicit in that is an understanding that there are a lot of things that kids need that we have to recognize aren't our job. But it's important for us to bring other people to the table to do that, because that's what the kids need.
Exactly.
And that's what they also need in order for us to educate them.
You can't learn when you're freezing cold and you don't have shoes, or you got a toothache, or whatever the situation may be. Your plan lists 10 core beliefs. Loved them, by the way. And if we can get a copy from your PR team, we'll make that available on our website. We don't have time to talk about all of them. There's 4 of them I wanted to ask some follow-up questions.
Sure.
One of your core beliefs was that student achievement and growth is driven by a highly effective, respective staff working as a team. 5,000 people are working on this team. That's a big team to lead. Do you have the resources to help the staff operate at that level?
Well, I think you go back to what I listed as one of my set of core beliefs, is that every part of the community is a potential resource. If we can draw upon those resources, yes.
Okay.
Because effectiveness is a couple of different things. One, effectiveness is actual teaching quality or actual work quality, and some of that is what you brought to the table, and then there's other pieces where we provide professional development and recognize what needs to happen in the classroom. But effectiveness is also stability within our buildings, right? Making sure we have teachers who are veteran teachers who can mentor new teachers, and so they need that ongoing support from the community in the ways we've talked about in order to have that stable environment, in order to thrive and really be appreciated for the work that they do.
That's awesome. Okay, there was another core belief that you mentioned, and you said that, quote, families are our partners, okay? Families are our partners. You and I have similar jobs in the sense that our success is determined by families, and we don't have a lot of control on that level. What are 3 things these families got to be good partners on for you to achieve this plan?
Well, we need families to, as much as possible, help make sure their kids are ready for school. And that's on a long-term basis, but on a daily basis. That in any way they can to make sure that they can, walk to the schoolhouse and be ready to learn that day. Now, that might mean getting them there on time so that we can feed them.
Yeah.
Or that might mean just making sure that we're aware of whatever issues are going on at home if they can't provide for some of those issues themselves. We also need families to work with us to get an understanding of what we're trying to get done, right? So on a regular basis, we have outcomes that we're trying to achieve, that we're trying to do. And so it's helpful if families understand those and reinforce those. And we try to make sure that we provide opportunities to do that. And we need to be better at that as well, to bring families in and invite them in to do that.
Okay.
And then just reinforcing some of those norms and expectations are incredibly important things.
Okay. Well, another core belief you had, I loved it. You mentioned the need for community partnerships to provide, quote, vital resources and opportunities. Resources and opportunities. What I love about that is Rico, we're in a day where people live on microscopic islands of personal preference and conviction. And we only work with people who believe exactly the way we do. And we draw lines, and we end up on these tiny islands. But now you're telling us, let's work together, okay? So let's talk about, that's a great term, community partnerships. What kind of partnerships are you talking about? And what are the vital resources that are needed?
Well, they range, there's a broad range, right? One way of thinking about community partnerships is we started last year, my first year, asking on the first day of school that people turn out to be welcome parties to schools, that they just stand outside the school and shake kids' hands and families' hands and say, welcome, it's so glad to see you here, it's incredibly important that you be here. That's incredibly important, to have the community come around and say, I see you and I recognize how important you are and the role that you will play in this community by being here.
Yeah.
That's a low-cost way of doing that, and we try to provide opportunities for doing that. But there's also the other end where we ask businesses and community groups to provide internships and externships and real practical learning opportunities for our students, and to come alongside schools and teachers and say, how can we really provide those opportunities for your students? Because Aurora has a wide range of commercial business opportunities, but certainly not the large commercial business opportunities that you might see in some urban areas. So it's important that even small businesses think about, is there some opportunity I can provide for a student to learn, to have that opportunity.
And these partnerships, how are those forged? Are they forged with each individual school? Are they brokered through the district? How do you envision that happening? I know a lot of these details haven't been worked out, but where are you headed with that?
Well, a couple of ways. One, we have a foundation, the APS Education Foundation, which formally does a lot of that partnership work. But then also individual schools have opportunities. If you walk in and talk to the principal, you can form a relationship and have that opportunity. We're also creating more educational platforms to do that. We've been working on a digital badging platform, which is a way of recognizing students' achievement, certain competencies that they have demonstrated. And we've been going to businesses asking them to come alongside us, and if they agree that these competencies are valuable, to add their name to it, so that the student has the ability to say, this company recognizes the value of this skill I've achieved, and that's important.
Okay, awesome. The fourth core belief that you said was that diversity is a strength in the community. I believe that, but the fact of the matter is diversity can make education extremely difficult. You've got, Rico, you got 130 cultures, 125 languages in your schools. And I started out in education, and I'll be honest, when I read 125 languages, to me, as an educator, that says chaos. To me, that doesn't say it's strengthening. How are you going to overcome these cultural diverse problems? You got kids that are coming here from refugee camps, don't know the language. Boom, the next day they're in a school. How are you going to make sure that stays a strength?
Well, we have for years in this country talked about the importance of making students who are globally competitive, right? Who can really understand and compete in a real global economy. And there are plenty of places in this country where they are bending over backwards, trying to find ways to expose their students to different cultures, different languages, and different opportunities. I don't have to bend over backwards, right? We have those in every single classroom. Yeah. And so we need to recognize that and value that and make sure we have our arms around ways to utilize that. Now, sometimes, we may not have enough translators, or we may not have enough of our resources translated into a variety of different languages. But that's another way that we partner with our community. We have a number of organizations in the community that do a lot of that work that we try to bring in and we partner with, that we can then take advantage of their experience and their expertise. One great example of that is the new Welcome Center that we partnered with the city and a number of other community partners to open inside one of our APS buildings.
Yeah. Stroke of genius. You guys made I don't know who made the decision, but you mentioned urban Aurora. The density there. There's no buildings down there. There's nothing available, and there's no land to build it. Somebody with APS got smart and said, the biggest building in this part of town is called Crawford Elementary School, and it's closed and locked up in the evenings. Let's open it and make it a community center. And boom, all kinds of stuff is happening down there, whether it's nutritional coaching, refugee services, these kinds of things. So kudos to you guys for that. You're already doing a lot of this stuff now. But
thank you.
Kudos to you for that. So let's break down these goals. I want to unpack them individually. There's 3 of them, but first, give us a big picture view of those 3 goals. Tell us what they are and briefly describe them.
Sure. And the big picture view is the name of this plan originally was APS 2020, Shaping the Future. And again, it goes back to that idea of self-determination, that we want students to have the ability to make decisions about their own future and to have what they need in order to be able to do that. So we have 3 large strategic goals. One is that every student will have a plan for their future. Okay. And the second is that every student will have a set of skills that will allow them to implement that plan. Okay. And the third is that they'll have a set of credentials that open doors.
Awesome.
Because sometimes you need that piece of paper to open the door to that next opportunity.
Okay. And so let's unpack those. The first goal is for students to have a plan.
Yes.
I love that. Tell me about it. Tell our listeners more about that.
Well, it's important that you have a plan, right? That you can sit down with you or you and your family and think about, okay, what are the next steps and how do we get there collectively or individually? And you can start that as early as preschool or kindergarten, right? We know that there are opportunities to open a college savings plan, right? When your child is born and to start investing and thinking about college, right? And that's a lot easier if you're doing $5 a month from a 3-year-old instead of thinking about it when suddenly your kid's in 12th grade, right? But that mindset of having that plan is something we want to partner with families about from day one. Because in this district, we have kids as early as 3 weeks of age going to our Zoom site at Jamaica up through college at Pickens Technical College. So
when will the plan, how old am I when, I think your plan says within the first 90 days of being introduced to APS, right?
Yes.
That's when this plan starts. Is that starting kindergarten, or where does that start at?
I'd like it to start as early as preschool.
Okay.
Right. And plans will look different. Right?
Yeah, you know the plan's going to be, I want to go to Disneyland next year. That's what the plan's going to be.
Well, for a preschooler, the plan is really sitting down with the family and the child and saying, okay, what do we need to do in order to get your kid successfully ready for kindergarten? What do we need to do to get your kid successfully ready for junior high school? Make sure the parent understands those levels and those reading expectations, and then start thinking about college savings planning and thinking about career opportunities. Exposing families to saying, this is currently the top 10 industries in Colorado and the country. And if you have an interest in your child pursuing this in the future, here are the kinds of things that you may want to think about exposing them to. Here's what's going on at the museum. Here's what's happening at the Aurora History Museum. That you can expose people to.
Does that plan follow me? At some point in the plan, I'm more involved than mom and dad if I'm a student.
Sure.
Does that plan follow me through my education, the school? And there's a plan I made in 5th grade. Am I still looking at that, evaluating that in 9th grade?
That's the vision. I mean, the vision is obviously that shifts, right? It goes from just kind of future casting to real time. Here are the classes I need to take. Here are the skills I need to have. If I want to get this internship, here's what I need to do, the steps to do that. Because obviously it gets much more concrete, much more serious when you're 10th, 11th, and 12th grade.
Yeah. Awesome. Good stuff. And I love the emphasis on college so young. You're probably already familiar with that, big research project out of Baltimore, Long Shadow, and they came up with, the 3 characteristics of kids that get out of poverty, kids that rise above challenges, and surprisingly, is graduating from high school. That's one of the big ones, and I think it's cool that you're building those kinds of educational goals in when they're younger. Okay, what about goal 2? And that is for students to develop a set of skills to implement that plan. Your strategic plan lists some specific skills, but talk to us about goal 2.
Sure. So looking at most research and work that's been done at the federal level and at the state level, there's an identified set of soft skills, 21st century workforce skills that employers are saying that we need employees to have and that we're not seeing well enough developed, and that also we recognize as having educational value. And so we've really developed this skills platform that we want to make sure permeates throughout our K through 12 system, so that kids aren't just learning math, but they're being called out and learning a set of skills around collaboration, a set of skills around critical thinking, and that we develop our own competencies and making sure that we teach that and identify it as such through that content.
Okay. And some of those skills were critical thinking, collaboration, self-direction, information literacy, and invention, creativity. Are those will those skill sets enlarge, or are those kind of where the plan's going to start focusing on those 5?
It's going to start in those 5, but there are subsets to those 5, right?
Okay.
When you think about information literacy or information technology, obviously all the things around how do you access technology, how do you utilize technology, there's a lot of things packed into that.
Okay. Your second critical skill, which I love, is collaboration, communication, interpersonal skills. We got to teach kids, Rico, that you got to work with everybody. There's going to be people that have different political views than you. They're going to have different family values. They're going to come from different cultures. They're going to come from different economic parts of the city. But what concerns me today is people all the way across the board are so determined they will only work with people that agree with them. Are kids learning these kind of collaborative skills that young in the public school system?
Well, and that's part of our vision. To me, what's the most important sub part of that is a skill that's known as code switching. Right? It's one thing to have a mindset that you embrace that and that you want to work with everybody. But the reality is not everybody has that. But there's also the reality is that you don't get to choose sometimes. Right? And so the skill of recognizing the situation and the context and being able to seamlessly switch into that and speak the code of whatever you're in. I speak differently with my family than I do in a professional setting. I speak differently with my friends than I do at church.
Yeah.
And that ability to turn that switch and speak the code of where you are is invaluable.
Yeah.
And our kids have that, and that's part of the diversity and multiculturalism because they are exposed to so many different communities. They learn that just naturally. So we need to take that and translate into a more formal setting and understand, okay, you understand in that context, now understand what it means to walk in the front door of a business and to put on that suit and tie and to speak the code of that business.
Okay. So you got to point 1 where you're helping these kids through the development of their educational time develop a personal plan, a personal strategy for their education. And I would imagine even at that point when you're getting into elementary and high school, you're talking about your life. Your goals are going to reflect your life dreams and those kinds of things. Then you're focusing on those skills: critical thinking, collaboration, self-direction, information literacy, and invention. What's the third goal?
The third goal is credentials, recognizing that credentials open doors. And sometimes it's not enough to just be able to do something. You need a credential that verifies that you have that skill, particularly in a society where we are becoming more there's more opportunities for people to acquire unique skills, but they don't necessarily have a credential for it. And a lot of this thinking comes out of some military work, actually, where we've had a lot of veterans come back from theaters of combat or just from deployments who've acquired a set of skills, but they don't have anything that verifies that they know how to do it.
Okay.
And so there's been a lot of thinking around how do you provide credentials for that. So we think about that very similarly in the district. We have kids who have a lot of skills, a lot of opportunities to acquire skills. So in addition to having a diploma, which is the core of what we do, we want to make sure we can certify that they might have some of those skills we talked about, the critical thinking, the collaboration. But there's also, we are one of the top users in the state of concurrent enrollment in the Ascent program. So we have kids who graduate from our high schools with college degrees, with 2-year degrees, and with significant college credit. Those are also important credentials. And that's an incredible, unique thing about APS, and we want to value that, and we want to build upon that.
Awesome. So we're talking things like college credits, industry certificates, work training, these kinds of things. You'll get out of high school and have some of this stuff already.
Yes.
Awesome. The plan now, what happens with the plan now? I mean, you guys have kind of, you've made it available on your website. It says draft right across it. That's the lawyer in you, right? But where do we go from here? Is it going to be refined more? Tell us where the plan comes.
Well, the strategic part of the plan, those large goals and everything, they are set, they are approved, and they are done. And again, that came from that community work. And we wanted to stay true to that process of really the community telling us what were the core beliefs. And so what that meant was that we couldn't start the implementation components of that until we finally heard from the community. So now that's finalized, and since that time, we've been working on those implementation pieces. In the next couple of months, we expect to roll out an implementation plan for how will we live up to those core beliefs. What are our proof points that we're living that? How do we intend to meet those strategic goals? And what are the metrics we should be held accountable for? Because that's important in meeting those goals. And
how will this be? How will the strategic plan be evaluated? You're stretching it way out to 2020. Any thoughts on how you and the board will continue to measure the progress and results? Yeah,
we will have metrics. We'll have very clear and hard metrics that say, here's our expectation around numbers. Here's our expectation around, for example, when you talk about the first strategic goal, a plan, it will be relatively easy for us to start to measure how many of our kids have plans and what's the level of completeness of those plans. And those are the kinds of goals that we want to set and then be held accountable for.
Good stuff. Practical stuff. I love it. I love the direction that you guys are going. Well, before we close, I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk to parents that are listening. And specifically as it would relate to this plan, if you can say anything to parents about the plan, what would you say?
Well, I would say two things. One, that the Aurora Public Schools is full of caring adults who want the best out of every one of our students. And we've gone through a process of working with our community to try and understand what this community's beliefs are and then live up to those beliefs. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to speak to this community and serve this community in a unique way. And the second thing is, to the extent it matters, I'm a parent of 2 students in this district, and I want the best for them. And so when I think about the work that we're doing, I keep them in mind and think about how do I make it better every single day, not just for their kids, but for mine.
Awesome. Well, you're doing a great job, Rico, and I want to thank you for your work in the community. The only guy I've ever known that can state his job description in a sentence. One more time. What is it, man? Come on.
My job is to accelerate learning for every APS student every day.
And you're doing a great job.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your service to the city. Well, folks, that's about all the time we have in this episode. So listen, let's take the time as we close to thank over 5,000 people working on the APS team, their teachers, their administrators, their school staff. You folks are working hard. It's not always said enough and with as much enthusiasm as it should, but we want to say thank you. You are investing in the city. You're investing in our greatest natural resource, which is our kids. We'll talk more next week.
You've been listening to the Love Aurora podcast. To get a text notification and link for our next broadcast, text the word Aurora to 74574. That's Aurora to 74574. You can also check out past episodes or recommend organizations at www.loveaurora.org. Thanks for listening.